always been kind of ambivalent about book endorsements, other well-known figures on the back of a book endorsing it, commending it. In fact, in the last six books I've written, I haven't even sought out any endorsements of the book. It's to me, it was just not worth the time and effort to go out and request endorsements. Now, I also think that in most cases, endorsements don't do much for sales. There are rare exceptions, however. In 2009, I published Finding God in the Shack, and I managed to, well, the publisher managed to get an endorsement for the book from Eugene Peterson, who had also endorsed The Shack. My book was about The Shack, and he gave a glowing endorsement of my book, which I think really did help sales. But those kinds of circumstances are pretty rare. Most endorsements, I don't think, have a lot of impact on anyone. Having said that, I wanted to talk in this video about the most meaningful endorsement I've ever received, and it was for my 2015 book, Is the Atheist My Neighbor? Because that book, as much as anything I've ever written, I think encapsulates my philosophy, which is that you should steel man people from the outgroups, people that you disagree with about things. You should try to present their arguments as strongly and winsomely as you can. You should seek to eradicate prejudice against that group within your group, actions like that. And so I really wanted to model Irenic friendly dialogue across deeply polarized fissures. And with that in mind, I wasn't going to seek endorsement from Richard Dawkins or Ray Comfort for that matter, because people like that sort of embody the very opposite of what I was trying to embody in this book. But I did seek an endorsement from J.L. Schellenberg. And Schellenberg is the professor of philosophy at Mount St. Vincent University in Canada. He is Canadian, and he's also one of the leading philosophers of religion in the world, and is in particular famous for the development of his divine hiddenness argument, which is one of the most important contributions to philosophy of religion in the last 30 plus years. So I requested it. He read the book, and then one day he sent me the following endorsement, which is one of the most impactful endorsements I'm going to say I've ever read, the most impactful I've ever read about something I've written. Now, this is what Schellenberg writes. There are some whose way of following the first of the great commandments has, in the manner of non-belief, meant violating the second. In this brief and lively, but remarkably full and acute discussion, Rouser shows the way out of this problem, impressively fair, and writing not perfunctorily but with feeling. He has found a way to express genuine neighborliness both to atheists like me and to Christians who struggle to reconcile love and loyalty. This is awesome. I'm going to say right now, I mean, this is not a great endorsement if you want something simple that people can easily grasp and maybe which will quickly motivate them to buy the book. Like the kind of endorsement where you just say, well, this is an amazing and important new contribution to the field. Everybody interested in the topic must read it. Okay, that's easy, straightforward, fine. But Schellenberg begins almost like a philosopher dispensing wisdom. You have to think about what he's saying. He says, there are some whose way of following the first of the great commandments has, in the manner of non-belief, and violating the second. Like, well, what does he mean by that? So, what's he referring to? Of course, you think, okay, so the first commandment is to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The second is to love your neighbor as yourself. And there are some who, the way that they've interpreted love of God has led them to violate their proper love of neighbor. He doesn't outright say that, but that's what he's saying in this indirect way. And what makes it particularly poignant is that Schellenberg is here an atheist doling out wisdom for the Christian, which in and of itself is further support for the argument of the book that Christians have unduly maligned and rejected and ignored atheists. Here's an atheist giving more theological and pastoral and ethical wisdom than you find in many Christians. So that the beginning is just It's not great if all you want is like a simple endorsement that's going to sell books. But I think it's brilliant for what I'm interested in. And then he goes on, and what I like here is I've always been a fan of using big words, not dumbing things down. And I've often been had pushback when I had a literary agent, when I've had editors in publishing, where they would say, "Yeah, you got to make this more accessible, use easier words." I get that, but I'm also thinking, I always like to go to the example of Beatrix Potter, who would write children's books a century ago using words like somnambulist, and kids would figure out what they meant. Kids would rise to the occasion. And I just feel like sometimes today we've really dumbed things down. So Schellenberg uses words like acute and perfunctorily. And some people are going to be like, what does that mean? I'm not sure what that means. And again, the endorsement, if it's meant to grab a person's attention in 3 seconds or whatever and hook them with the book, the person might just walk away not thinking twice after having read this endorsement. But I think it's brilliant, and I think it's wonderfully eloquent. And then the way he ends, the Rouser has found a way to express genuine neighborliness, which is, I couldn't think of a better endorsement than that, to say that I actually have in this very book embodied the spirit and thesis of the book itself, to model the need and call for neighborliness to my atheist neighbor, both to atheists like me and to Christians who struggle to reconcile love and loyalty. Now, what's beautiful about that last bit is he now brings that back to the beginning, where he began with the struggle between two commandments, love of God and love of neighbor. This book will help you resolve the struggle you've experienced between those two commandments. So there's a symmetry to the quote. There's profundity, there's eloquence, there's concision. I think this, hands down, is the best endorsement I have ever received. So well crafted. I don't care if it was not the most effective at selling books. I think it is a testament both to J.L. Schellenberg, but uh, he is a testament to what I did, which is very humbling. So this is my philosophy is I often go to 1 Corinthians 13 and say you could have the best philosophical, theological, logical, ethical, historical arguments, but if you have not love, you are a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. Christian witness and effective Christian apologetics is not about winning arguments. It's not about having the most followers on social media. It's not about being invited to speak at the most prestigious institutions. It's about neighborliness. It's about embodying the love of God and the love of neighbor and reconciling, realizing that there is no conflict between these two, but in fact, your very embodiment of being a Christian witness who lifts up your neighbor, who steel mans their arguments, who treats them with integrity, who embodies respect and Christian virtue, that will always be the single essential foundation for whatever else you are going to do as an apologist. Now, I'm very far from having achieved that in my life. I've strived more or less with greater or lesser effect to achieve that. And to have somebody like Schellenberg from that historic outgroup, somebody who himself was raised in a Christian community and left Christianity, I think, in his early 20s, he knows it from the inside. And to have somebody like him, such a brilliant thinker and philosopher, write something like this to endorse something I had written was truly a gift. And so the best endorsement I ever received was from an atheist.